All right, I'm Justin Vipperman. I'm back to explain the impact of the Spanish flu or the influenza epidemic of 1918 on the Magic Valley here in Idaho. But to get there first, let's explain that the origins of the flu actually came out of a military base in Kansas as we declared war on Germany in the First World War, and those soldiers headed off to Europe. Those soldiers took influenza to Europe, where it then went to Asia, Africa, and back up to Spain. In the meantime, as it's ravaging Italians, Italian scientists and doctors name it the Italian word for influence, which is where we get influenza. In the meantime, in May of 1918, 8 million Spaniards had contracted the flu or influenza, which is where we get the term the Spanish flu. It then makes its way back across the Atlantic, where we see the East Coast is really getting hit with the Spanish flu. We don't see it here in the West until much later into October, where we start to get our first accounts. Although World War I is going on, we're starting to see the collapse of the German army. And so a lot of the front pages are talking about World War I and that collapse. But if you read into a lot of the later pages of the newspaper in the beginning of October, we start to see these stories of the epidemic really coming through and into Boise. We get our first account here in Twin Falls in October 10th of 1918, and health officials get really worried. State officials, the State Board of Health, takes a recommendation from the U.S. Surgeon General to quarantine, and they stop all meetings and put everything on hold in October. That gets pretty crazy, and people get really upset, as we're seeing today. There in October 15th of 1918, the Eldridge Clothing Company puts up an ad, pays for an ad in the newspaper, which suggests or advice on how to stay away from influenza, including washing your hands, covering your mouth, getting outside, and just making sure that you're staying away from people. However, it explodes, and so the county actually puts a hold on everything. You can't go to dance halls, you can't go to town hall meetings, you can't gather in places of worship, and that really shuts everything down. And within a few days, the schools are shut down too in mid-October. That kind of continues until Armistice Day, November 11th. Armistice is signed and the war is over, and that news trickles back into the Magic Valley. And a few days after Armistice Day, we see a parade with the Twin Falls Band marching through the streets, and 5,000 men, women, and children join them and march up and down the street, where they then congregate at Main and Shoshone in downtown Twin Falls, and that party goes on until midnight. People freak out. Health professionals freak out and are like, hey, this can't be happening. We're going to have a surge in cases, which by November 14th, it spikes. And you see places in Buell, Filer, Hanson, Murtaugh, really rising in cases. In fact, at one point it says that Murtaugh, there isn't a family that isn't affected, is not affected, not infected by the virus, but that everybody is feeling the effects over in Murtaugh. Kimberly, however, they self-quarantine with 0 people having the influenza. They won't allow people off the train in Kimberly, and they don't allow cars to drop people off. They quarantine with nobody infected at that point in time. This happens in several other places in Minidoka County, where they put up guards around the city and you can't get in. People start to get really frustrated, though, as we see the police are supposed to enforce anybody who's coughing or sneezing. They're supposed to be enforcing rules on people spitting on the concrete. They're supposed to be washing their hands, keeping social distance. Any building that has people that are infected inside are required to put a sign outside that says influenza here, which is just fascinating in and of itself. This goes on, and people are frustrated because they said, we were willing to quarantine during the war, but now that the war is over, we really would like to be out. Well, health officials see that a deterrent to the influenza continuing to spread is wearing masks, and so they require masks, and people lose it. And they do not want to wear masks, as we're seeing today. They suggest that it's hard to breathe, but really the biggest thing that they keep bringing up is smoking. They can't smoke with a mask on. That goes into December, where Rock Creek used to hold a Christmas party and dance out there, and that has to be canceled. All parties, Christmas parties, are canceled. However, in January, we see a huge spike of the Spanish flu in the Magic Valley. It doubles in cases in Twin Falls County. Hanson is hit really hard. Buell and Filer are hit hard. Wendell actually is hit really hard, and they have to turn their high school into a makeshift emergency hospital. Same with Hagerman. Hagerman sees a second spike in February, where people are really worried about them, and because they're so spread out in the Hagerman Valley, multiple people who have already gotten the flu are sent out to take care of those families who are really suffering from influenza at the time. The biggest argument at the time, other than wearing a mask, is do we send our kids to go back to school? Twin Falls sent their kids back to school December 30th, and then they were worried in January, is this the right thing? Should we not have sent them back? And they really grapple with that idea. Filer, they decide they're not going to send their kids back in early January on Friday, the first Friday of January, and then on Monday they come back and say, nope, just kidding, we're going to send our kids back. Hanson has the same problem, Buell has the same problem, and they all go back and forth on whether they should. Ultimately, Twin Falls School District comes together and says, look, we got 2,300 kids in the county, and 83% of them are not sick, and so we're not going to do that. There is that second spike, like I said, that happens January to February, but by the spring, it's kind of gone away. There are repeated cases over and over and over again. We have a third spike that happens late of 1919 and into 1920. However, it's never massive enough to push for state or government regulations, and that's really what happens here. So I find it fascinating. I hope that you do too. I hope that you can see the parallels between 1918 and today. I hope to do a video here coming up about a similar parallel that takes place in the 1960s. I hope that you're doing great. I look forward to seeing you. If you have any questions, reach out, email me, give me a call, stop by my house, whatever you want.